you need these equations. We need to know the midpoint. The midpoint is you add your x coordinates, divide by 2, you add your y coordinates, divide by 2. The midpoint of a line segment you need to be able to calculate. The distance. The distance of a line segment is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. The slope equation, you need to be able to calculate the slope of a line, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. The equation of a linear line, y is equal to mx plus b. You need to be able to calculate the equation of a linear line. Also, perpendicular slope. Perpendicular slope of a line segment, if I know m, the perpendicular slope is negative 1 over m. Okay? These are the equations that you need for the test. And you need to be able to prove different shapes. So we talked about triangles. The different triangles that we have a triangle where all the sides are equal. That's called equilateral. You can prove that the triangle is equilateral by using this equation here and calculating the distance of each side. If all the distances are the same, then it's an equilateral triangle. If just two sides are equal, if only two sides are equal, then that is an isosceles. And then the third type of triangle that you need to be able to prove is called scalene. And no sides are the same. So this has 3 equal sides. This has 2 equal sides. And this has no equal sides. The other type of triangle that we have talked about is called a right angle triangle. Right angled triangle. And we can determine if a triangle is a right angled triangle because from the points, okay, the points of a triangle are called the vertexes, okay, or vertices, okay. So if I use 2 of the vertices and I find the slope of the bottom, and I find that the slope of this guy is the negative reciprocal, it's the perpendicular slope, then it's a right angle triangle. So you can prove a right angle triangle by determining the slope of the base and making sure that it follows this equation to give you 90 degrees there. And if it has 90 degrees, if one of the angles of a triangle is 90 degrees, then it's a right angle triangle. So triangles, you need to be able to prove them. Then we also talked about how to determine the different type of centers of the triangles. Okay? We can have a triangle here. And if I find the midpoint and connect the bisect here, I can find the middle. That's using the midpoint to the vertex. That's called finding the centroid. The centroid of a triangle is when I have a midpoint connected to the vertex where those two lines meet. It's called the centroid. Then I have a other type of triangle that uses the altitude. Okay, the altitude is from a vertex From one of the sides, you find the perpendicular slope, you know the slope, and then you use this point to determine the line that is the altitude. So where the two altitude lines, which are 90 degrees, where they meet, that is called the orthocenter. Okay? Where the two altitudes meet, it's called the orthocenter. And then the last type is if we have like a circle around here, and I were to find the midpoint, using the midpoint and using 90 degrees here, this point right here is called the circumcenter. Okay? And that is using the perpendicular slope from the midpoint. Okay, so this is using the altitudes. This is using midpoint, and then perpendicular slopes. And you can find that. Okay, so that's all about triangles. You need to know equilateral, isosceles, scaling, right angle. You should be able to determine the centroid, orthocenter, circumcenter. We also had a project on that, so there shouldn't be a problem. Then we talked about quadrilaterals. Quadrilaterals. Yes. My screen is stuck. Okay, let me reshare. Just give me a second here. Can you see? Is that better there, Billy? Can you see the square?
I still can't see.
Square. Still cannot see?
Yeah. Oh, now I can see.
Okay. Quadrilaterals, we have square. We have rectangle. We have parallelogram. We have rhombus. And we have kite. You need to be able to prove that these shapes represent these quadrilaterals. So you square. A square, you can prove it by using the distance formula, right? And also, all these are 90 degrees. You can also prove a rectangle. These two sides will be equal. These two will be equal also. And these will have 90 degrees here. And if I do the midpoint, if I do the midpoint on this, you're going to get a parallelogram in there. You're going to get a parallelogram. Okay? You can prove that what a parallelogram is this slope must be the same as this slope, and this slope must be the same as that. And that's a parallelogram, and there's no 90 degrees. Okay? A rhombus, if you connect these 2 points, this distance and this distance will be the same. These distances here will be the same. So you can prove a rhombus by calculating the distance from to the middle there. Okay? And then a kite, again, this distance will be the same as this, and then this guy will be the same as this guy right here. And then that's what a kite is. Okay? So you need to be able to prove if I give you the vertices of a quadrilateral, you need to be able to determine if it's a square, a rectangle, a parallelogram, a rhombus, or a kite. And I believe then the last thing that we studied was the circle. And with the circle, if I take a chord and I do the perpendicular bisect, and I take another chord and I do a perpendicular bisect, those perpendicular bisects will be in the middle. And that was the last thing that we studied yesterday. And that covers all the topics that we studied. You need to be able to use these equations. When I'm marking, this is what I'm looking for, okay? Number one, you need to show, maybe you can draw a picture. You can draw a picture, okay? Number two, you should be able to use the full equation. Write down your equations. Show all work. Show all of the calculations. Just don't put the final answer. You have to show your work. And then if it's a word problem, you need to have a sentence. Okay? So that's all for analytic geometry.